Talkapolis, the social media TV network for your city.
I'm Jeff Cornwall, and this is the Entrepreneurial Mind. Today my guest is Clint Smith. We'll be back to talk with Clint in a moment.
The Vane Center, now celebrating 10 years service in Nashville, Tennessee.
To celebrate our 10th year in this new office, we're offering anyone who mentions Talkapolis as when they call in for a consultation, we'll see that as a free consultation or second opinion.
Welcome.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
I first met you shortly after I came to town, and you guys were just getting Emma started. Talk a little bit about those early days and kind of how you got that going and where the idea came from.
It's all a little bit of a haze.
It is a haze. It's a long time ago.
We started Emma really, started working on the idea in around 2002. This was on the heels of another startup that Will Weaver, my co-founder, and I had both been a part of.
Which was?
A company called smallbusiness.com.
Right.
And it was setting out to become the basic premier destination online for small business owners to connect with each other, share advice, share experiences, ultimately rate and recommend products and services and those sorts of things. And it's like many ideas and startups of its time, it ran out of time when the dot-com bust came a calling.
Yep.
But we saw the promise of the web and what you could do with a good idea and a good team, and so we felt like we wanted to try it again on our own. But
you're not a techie guy. You're a writer.
I was a writer, and I got a little bit involved in the product side of things at City Search and then at Small Business, and got bitten a little bit by the bug. But Will and I were not techie guys. Will brought the design sensibility. I brought the brand and editorial sensibility, and together felt like we could create a nice experience for the customer. Both with the software itself and with the customer service behind it. But you're right, we lack the technical chops to build something like we were setting out to build. So we had to supplement ourselves with that over time.
Right. And so you start out in a tiny little house, and you weren't
Not
even in
even
a house.
that. We traded a pair of cubicles down in faceless Grassmere Business Park for a website redesign. We were taking odds and ends jobs just to pay the bills, and while we worked on the
anything for a dollar.
Anything for a dollar, anything for a cubicle. Even the cell phone coverage didn't work there. So we worked there for probably the first 9 months or so. Traded up to our first real office space, which was the upstairs of Patterson House, which is now Catbird Seat. So that was our space. It didn't look anything like the Catbird Seat back then. We were there for about a year, and then upgraded again to a small house near the Parthenon in Centennial Park.
Okay.
And then moved. So you can trace Emma's history through a series of progressive houses.
I think there's actually a tour in town you can take.
There probably is.
Yeah,
Like
that's
the
the Emma
Kramer tour
tour
in Seinfeld.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's the Emma
Kramer
tour.
reality tour, the Emma reality tour. We were in Hillsborough Village in a small house there for a while, and then scattered among several. We sort of fanned out across Hillsborough Village when we outgrew that, and then ultimately moved into the building that now Green Guitars has taken over on 8th, and then moved into the Trolley Barns about 18 months ago. And we think that's home forever.
It's a beautiful home, too.
We like it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful home. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way about growth? I mean, I have you come in and talk to my students about growth, and they love hearing some of those lessons and the things you got right and the things that you learned from.
We didn't get it right.
Yeah, you learned from, as they say. Exactly. So what are some of the kind of the big takeaways you've had about growth, and if you ever were to start another business again, you might know to do maybe a little bit differently next time?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. Lots of pile-ups over 10 years in terms of the lessons learned, wisdom attained the hard way. There are a few that stand out. I think, and you actually hit on one already. We probably would have spent a little bit more time, and I talk to people now about this, really setting the table for the business and starting by understanding what it is we were setting out to do, arranging the seats around that table based on the skills and experiences we would need to pull it off, and then really stopping to understand the seats that we wanted to occupy ourselves, right? So that we were clear on our own roles, our own strengths, our own weaknesses, and that from the business's standpoint, how we needed to surround ourselves with other talented folks, whether those are partners, employees, advisors, part-timers, what have you. At the beginning, you have to sort of cobble it together any way you can.
Right.
But I think we would have spent a little bit more time on that part of it early on. I think with that, we've come to really appreciate the value of understanding personal strengths and styles and what that does for your own work, but also, obviously, more importantly, your collaboration with others.
Right.
And I think if I were to start something again, I would go through that table exercise in more earnest. And I would also bring in an advisor to really work on strengths and styles, so that I go into it, would go into it eyes wide open in terms of where I'm going to provide the most value, but very quickly understand how to supplement that with other folks.
Right.
So that's one of them. I think the hardest, and then that's how I think we would have gotten started had we do it all over again. But then, as you know, very quickly things change, and I think the hardest thing for certainly me as an entrepreneur, I think most entrepreneurs the first time around, to grasp is the fact that the picture you have today is going to be completely different 6 to 12 months from now. The people are going to be different, the needs are going to be different, and that team's going to evolve. It's going to change shape. And so I think there's a chance to set expectations around that, and bring people in, and to walk some things out a little bit more slowly in terms of how deeply you involve folks, and
Sure.
give a little time to play out, knowing that landscape's going to change.
As an outsider, one of the things I've observed about you guys is it's always been your culture, though, that's been sort of that rudder that's helped you keep going in the same direction, even as people have come and gone. You've grown and moved, and what have you done to do such a good job maintaining that culture?
I think the biggest thing of all is we just constantly talk about it. We constantly work on it. I think we all end up as individuals doing relatively well the things that we're just most deeply passionate about. We focus on culture because I'm just deeply interested in it. And what I'm really ultimately interested in and fascinated by is certainly the art and science of designing software and designing a customer experience, but more than that, designing a company. And the culture just comes with that. It has
Right.
to. So we're constantly talking about what that means. I've increasingly become a fan, and we start out, and again, some of it is just in the very beginning, stupidly simple stuff. It's just stuff that that you just sort of feel and want to convey to other people. We wanted in the beginning to create a place where we wanted to spend all of our days, all of our
Right.
time, and fill it with people we enjoyed spending time with, and with in the kind of environment we appreciated. Where
And a Kegerator?
And a Kegerator, certainly. Which I think speaks to the fact that we from the beginning wanted to take our work very seriously, but ourselves and sort of our trappings, not so much. Which
Right.
is why, when we were able to bring in people, like-minded folks who felt, again, equally committed to the work, but could sort of not take everything else quite so seriously. You can do things like have a Kegerator, and
it worked.
And it works.
It
Yeah.
works.
It does. It doesn't mean that it's without its challenges. In fact, sometimes to have and preserve that culture and in some ways extend it. Right. I would argue that our culture is stronger now than it's ever been, with all of the folks who are part of it and just the rich and sort of textured fabric we have. And plus, we just have a deeper understanding of what culture means. But you have to be vigilant in protecting the culture, and sometimes that means making moves that don't seem comfortable or.
But it also, I'm sure, had to change somewhat as the organization changed.
Oh, absolutely.
A culture just looks different when you've got a few people sitting around a table than it does when you have over 100 people.
It absolutely.
I mean,
does.
there are essences of it the same, but there's things
That's
that have
right.
to change.
That's right. I do think it's a little bit like the Jim Collins piece where the core stays the same. Everything outside of that changes, and that's certainly been the case with us. You hit those milestones, as you know all too well. When we hit 25 people years ago, it was the first moment where we realized we needed to start writing things down.
Right.
Because we weren't all in one room where it just happens through
Right.
osmosis, and you just can't avoid the conversation, right, that you're having as a group. And so we did, and we created effectively our first employee handbook, which we called the MS Style Guide, which was meant to try to capture that essence, right, and speak to it, convey it in plain terms that other folks could grasp and then convey on to other people. As we've grown, I definitely think we've had to become more intentional about the culture, and I think we've also looked for ways to express it in more concrete ways. And just in the last 2 years, I think we've really focused even more on that than we have in the past. And an example is, I could talk at length about how we're a pretty open and collaborative culture, but I'd rather walk you through the trolley barns and show you how we've designed the office around that
Right.
to foster collaboration at the team level and at the company level. We could talk about how we're a culture of accountability and respect, but I'd rather walk you into our Rocks meeting every Wednesday, where it's the company-wide huddle, effectively, where our project leads get up and spend 30 seconds at the lectern sharing their project, telling us very candidly how it's going, and admitting also equally candidly when it's a little bit stuck or a little bit stalled. And to show you on Fridays where our product teams take turns getting up in front of that same group and sharing the work of the past 2-week sprint cycle, and sometimes acknowledging that they committed to 100 points and only got 70 done. That is a ton of accountability and a ton of respect. And if it's a lot of respect, obviously the product folks are showing the rest of the company, but the rest of the company walks out feeling an enormous amount of respect for those folks being willing to do that. So culture expressed in concrete terms has become a big theme for us, I think, at 100 people when it has to be.
Well, we are out of time. It's always fun to sit down and chat with you, and let's do it again soon.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks.